All right, well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Breakfast with the Bible. We are today in Psalm 83. I had to do quite a bit of study on this one because I wanted to highlight a lot of things. I'm testing this new microphone out again. Excuse me. I wanted to highlight a lot of things that were kind of specific to this particular psalm because it does mention a number of names that I wasn't even I was familiar with, but I didn't really know a whole lot about it. So it is 18 verses. It's going to take a few minutes to get through. Being optimistic about that. So we'll go ahead and read right through it right now. It is, again, just a psalm of Asaph. There is nothing specific in the superscription. My title in mind says Israel's Name Forgotten. For me, I think the title of this is going to be Israel is Surrounded, and you'll kind of see what I'm talking about when we get a little bit further in. So starting in verse 1, it says, "Keep not thou silence, O God, hold not thy peace, and be not still, O God." So obviously we can see from that verse, this is a prayer. This is a prayer of deep desperation. Lord, don't be silent. Do something. Verse 2, "For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, Come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee. The tabernacles of Edom and the Ishmaelites of Moab and of the Hagarenes and the Hagarenes." This word Hagarenes is another word for, let's see here in verse 6. Let me get to it here. The Hagrites, and we'll kind of get to that explanation here in a little bit. Verse 7 says, "Gebal and Ammon and Amalek, the Philistines with the inhabitants of Tyre. Assur also is joined with them. They have holpen the children of Lot, Selah." Verse 9, "Do unto them as unto the Midianites, as to Sisera, as to Jabin at the brook of Kison, which perished at Endor." Pausing there for a moment. How many of you remember the Ewok movie from the 80s? Battle for Endor, Battle of Endor. I always remember that when I go through this verse. "They became as dung for the earth. Make their nobles like Oreb and like Zeeb, yea, all their princes as Zebah and as Zalmunna. Who said, Let us take to ourselves the houses of God in possession. O my God, make them like a wheel, as the stubble before the wind. As the fire burneth the wood, and as the flame setteth the mountains on fire, so persecute them, or pursue them with thy tempest, and make them afraid with thy storm. Fill their faces with shame, that they may seek thy name, O Lord. Let them be confounded and troubled forever. Yea, let them be put to shame and perish, that men may know that thou, whose name alone is Jehovah, art the most high over all the earth." So again, this is a psalm of Asaph. And I'm going to put my notes right. I'm going to switch my notes from my Bible here for a moment. So a psalm of Asaph. Some suggest that this psalm is connected to the victory of Jehoshaphat's time, but still others consider this a less specific and believe it refers to Israel's constant battles with their enemies. So this could be a specific reference or just a generalized, hey, Israel is always up against somebody who wants to destroy her. Obviously, we see that today. Nevertheless, Asaph is pleading with God to come to the aid of Israel. We see that in verse 1. He cries to God, desperately asking him not to be silent. Don't sit back while your people are under attack. And I think, again, we could probably hear this prayer being spoken today. Verse 2 says, "For lo," this could be translated as because Asaph, or because thine enemies make a tumult. Now, what's interesting to me is Asaph makes a statement that I probably missed every time I read this. I didn't really take it too deep, but he mentions thine enemies, they that hate thee, They have taken crafty counsel against thy people and consulted against thy hidden ones. So he's identifying the people with God. God has a responsibility, in a sense, a relationship, a covenant, all these various things with this people. And Asaph is trying to appeal to that. He makes a statement that says, this is your stuff that you should be dealing with. Not in so many words, but I hope you get the idea. God needs to do something almost out of necessity. But then look at what he says in verses 2 and 3 again. Thine enemies, again, he's pointing that these are God's enemies. So anybody against God's people is going to be against God. These are his enemies. Again, he's appealing to the fact that this is not only Israel that is in danger, but God's possession and even his name. Verses 4 and 5 describe the immensity of what's coming against Israel. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent, they are confederate against thee. A number of people, a number of groups have come against Israel in this particular statement in order to erase them from existence. They do not want Israel to be around. And that has been happening ever since. That is happening right now, and I have a feeling it's going to always be that way. Now, that should tell you something very, very important about Israel. The fact that everybody wants them destroyed kind of tells me that there's something special about them. Israel's enemies have come together against her. Now, in making a reference to a cartoon I watched with my son, this is I believe it's a DC superhero cartoon. One of the villains, the main villain, said, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. This is true about this statement. These other groups of people may not have been enemies with each other, but they had one common goal, and that was to eradicate Israel. Israel is literally surrounded, and you can see here by this map that they have nothing around them that's safe. They've got water, and they've got enemies on all sides that remain. Now, who were these people? Now, I have to flip back in my notes because I made the notes before I began the rest of the lesson. So who are the people that are coming against Israel? It says in verse 6, the tabernacles of Edom, descended from Esau, Jacob's brother, so a familial connection to Israel, and often portrayed as the ultimate enemy of Yahweh and his people. Keep that in mind. Descended from Esau, the other half of the descendant. So there was Jacob, there was Esau. So we see the break there in the family. Okay, we see Jacob being chosen going this way. We see Esau being deceived and going this way. Then we've got the Ishmaelites. Same story. Descended from Ishmael, the son of Abram, and his wife's bondservant. So, again, outside of the realm of the will of God to create this generation, to create this lineage, Sarah said, no, I can't wait. This is taking too long. Go and have a child with my bondservant. Okay, there's another one. Number 2. This is the broken family situation here. So we've got Esau, who was not a very liked character, and then we have Ishmael, who, again, not by his own fault, but the descendant of a poor choice. We have the Moabites, and again in verse 6, descendants from Lot. Moab was the son of Lot, following the immoral, incestuous relationship between a drunken Lot and his older daughter. Again, you see where this is coming from. This is the breakdown of the family. No wonder we are told not to drink wine. The Moabites represent the flesh in its strong rebellion to all that is spiritual, and in the depth to which the flesh will stoop to defeat the spiritual. Now, we have the Hagarenes in the rest of verse 6, or the Hagarites, whatever I said. Hagarites. These are associated with Hagar, Sarah's bondservant. So after she had Ishmael, seems as though she eventually had more children with whomever. So again, there's this, the opposing side to the will of God in this kind of dynamic. Then we have the Ammonites in verse 7, descended from, you guessed it, the other daughter of Lot, in that drunken relationship. So, a very, very broken situation here. Now we have the Amalekites, descended from Amalek, the son of Eliphaz, the grandson of Esau. So now, we've got this same kind of storyline going on, this descendant of broken family. Looking at the rest of the end of verse 7, we have Tyre. Now, actually having close ties with Israel until Ahab married the Phoenician princess Jezebel. And their union led to the infiltration of pagan worship and idolatry in Israel. So Jezebel was a dominant influence on Ahab and persuaded him to abandon Yahweh and establish the religion of Baal. Another opposition to God. Then in verse, in verse 7, we also have the Philistines, descended from Ham. Ham was the son of Noah that saw his father naked. Now, this was considered deeply disrespectful, given that he didn't even bother trying to cover him up. Ham walks in, Noah is in his birthday suit, and Ham does nothing about it, doesn't attempt to cover him up, doesn't look away, whatever. I'm going to read something also that I got from Bible Study Tools, but I'm going to stress that it is only speculative. There is nothing that I've come across that can really validate this. But I wanted to put it out there because it is kind of a point of view, and may or may not be totally accurate, but it suggests something. Some scholars actually believe that the phrase that we find in Scripture, he looked upon his nakedness, was actually implying something more vile than just seeing him. Some suggest that Ham even consecrated Noah because there was no more children. Now again, this is merely speculation. I don't know of anything that can confirm this story, but I've read it more than once. So I did want to put it there as a possibility. Again, there is this, obviously we see this breakdown of things that end up being the enemies of Israel. In verse 8, we have Assur, Assyria, descended from Abraham's wife after Sarah died. So this is Keturah in Genesis 25. This is the third side of this prophetic instance in Isaiah, which I'm going to read here in a moment. Isaiah 19:23 to 25 speaks of this third thing. So this third descendant, if you will. Isaiah 19:23 to 25 says, "In that day shall there be a highway out of Egypt to Assyria, and the Assyrian shall come into Egypt, and the Egyptian into Assyria, and the Egyptians shall serve with the Assyrians. In that day shall Israel be the third with Egypt and with Assyria, even a blessing in the midst of the land, whom the Lord of hosts shall bless, saying, Blessed be Egypt, my people, and Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, mine inheritance." So there's a picture of three there. So Keturah being one of the three. Verse 8, again, it also says, "They have holpen the children of Lot." So Assyria had kind of teamed up here with the children of Lot, the Moabites and the Amalekites. if I'm saying that correctly. So this is referring to verses 6 and 7. Now, verse 9, do unto them as unto the Midianites, as to Sisera, as Jabin, and the brook at the brook of Kison. This is referring to Judges 6 to 8. The Canaanite King Jabin and his general Sisera in Judges chapter 4. This is the example that we have, the defeat of the Midianites. Now in verse 10, Endor, the Midianites were defeated by Gideon, and they were dung for the earth. This suggests that they were laid across the land, unburied, rotting all over the ground. And then verse 11, make their nobles like Oreb and like Zeeb, and yea, all the princes of Zebah and to Zalmunna. All were princes of the Midianites, defeated by Gideon in Judges 7. So now I can go back to that point, which I have here. Let's see. Bear with me one moment, because I had to jump around a little bit. So verse 12, who said, let us take to ourselves the houses of God in possession? This was referring to the Midianites. The Midianites would have said, let us take the houses of God in our possession. Then Gemeron wrote this. He says, the Midianites had despoiled the land of the crops and had caused great fear among the Israelites. This spoiling of Israel's crops is probably referred to in the bold claim, let us take possession of the pasture lands of God. This was the Midianites' plan, their mission. Let's take everything we can. In verse 13, oh my God, make them like a wheel, as the stubble before the wind. Asaph's prayer to God to defend Israel, he asks that the enemies be scattered and burned. Now, the image here is a tumbleweed. This word wheel here is actually referring to a tumbleweed, because it would be round and it would just kind of roll. Powerless to determine its own direction, dry, brittle, and very easily burned. Carrying the same image into verse 15, where it says, so pursue them with thy tempest and make them afraid with thy storm. Again, I'll read 13, 14, and 15. Oh my God, make them like a tumbleweed, as the stubble before the wind. As the fire burneth the wood, and as the flame setteth the mountains of fire, so pursue them with thy tempest and make them afraid with thy storm. This would appear, where a powerful storm would appear to chase a fragile tumbleweed through the desert as the wind blows against it. So you see the wind blowing. I think of, I want to say it is Buster Keaton, who would walk, he'd lose his hat on the ground, and as he would walk, it would slide. He would kick it with his foot, and it would almost look like he was chasing it. It's that same idea. The tumbleweed is rolling in the wind, but as the wind is pursuing it, the tumbleweed continues to roll. The tumbleweed has no power to go anywhere other than where the wind is pushing it. Now, verse 16 gives us something very, very profound. Fill their faces with shame, that they may seek thy name, O Lord. Something we may not actually expect to see, but honestly, I'm glad we do. This is and should be the end of desire of all that run in with the enemy of God. Asaph prays that God would humble them, but not just bring them low, but to do it in such a way that they would actually turn around and seek the Lord. That would be a desire for all of us. Spurgeon wrote, shame has often weaned men from their idols and set them upon seeking the Lord. Again, this is the desire here. The psalm is ended with the author's desire to see that the men recognize Jehovah and glorify him as Most High. Again, something we should all certainly desire to see. This always ought to be our desire in any situation or conflict, that men everywhere may know God. All men in one sense or another must be destroyed if they are to be saved. Let them be confounded and troubled forever, yea, let them be put to shame and perish. This word perish here, most do not believe that this is a end their life kind of perish. This is a die to self kind of thing. Let them be ashamed. Let their self-righteousness, let their person of themselves die in order to recognize God as Most High. That men may know that thou, whose name alone is Jehovah, art the Most High over all the earth. Again, that should be our desire for all to see that. Now, it didn't actually take as long as I thought it would, but I want to go back and point out something about who these people were. The enemies of Israel, in this particular instance, had all come from somebody who would have been in a position of jealousy, a position of bitterness, a position of Israel was chosen, this was rejected, this was God's plan, this was not. There's this, it is a picture of this spiritual battle that God's people have with those who are not. So it was interesting and really profound for me to find out all of these little details that kind of added a similarity to every single one of these groups of people, that they had very, very close. Again, it was the history of that was so similar in each and every one. It was almost amazing to me to find out. I pray that kind of enlightened you as well as it did me, because again, I haven't really given it that much thought. We kind of sometimes read over these and go, yeah, Israel got enemies, we know that for sure. But I hadn't really dug in to find out really the vast dynamic of their enemies and how it would have began. Israel's had enemies from the beginning and will probably never cease to have enemies. But this paints a good picture of where they came from. So, as always, thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, do those things you do. And we will see you next time when we tackle Psalm 84 and continue our journey through this wonderful book. Thank you and God bless.